I was sitting in a hospital chair I had driven 4 hours to reach when my daughter-in-law walked past me in the hallway without stopping. Not a glance. Not a note. Just the click of her heels on the linoleum and the faint trail of an expensive perfume that I recognized because I had given her the bottle for Christmas. My son was in that room recovering from a minor procedure, and I had left work at the library in Fredericton at noon, the moment he called. I had not eaten. I had not stopped for gas until the warning light came on somewhere past Moncton. I arrived with a thermos of soup I made that morning and a paperback he had asked me to bring. She walked past me as though I were a stranger waiting for a bus. I sat with the thermos in my lap for a long time after that. The drive back to Fredericton that night felt like something I would not be able to describe to anyone who had not lived it. The Trans-Canada was dark and flat, and the October sky pressed down on everything with the kind of quiet that makes you think too clearly. I kept turning over the moment in my mind. The heels, the perfume, the way she had not even slowed her stride. My son, Daniel, had been kind enough on the phone when I arrived home. A little tired, he said, a little overwhelmed. You know how Nicole gets when she is stressed. I had said, of course. I had said I understood. That was something I had been saying for a very long time. I am 64 years old. I retired early from the New Brunswick public library system after 31 years, and I live alone in the house where I raised Daniel and his younger sister, Claire. After their father passed, it is a small house on a quiet street in Fredericton with a birch tree in the front yard that has grown so tall I can no longer see the top from the porch. I live on my Canada pension plan and a modest OAS supplement, and I manage well enough. I have always known how to stretch things. Teachers and librarians. We learned that early. What I had not learned early enough was when to stop stretching for other people. It began gradually, the way these things always do. Alone here, a covered bill there. When Daniel and Nicole bought their house in Dieppe 6 years ago, I contributed $40,000 toward the down payment. I told myself it was what a mother did. When Nicole's catering business had a slow winter 3 years later, I transferred money each month to cover their mortgage gap. I told myself it was temporary when their second car needed replacing and the financing fell through. I co-signed the loan. I told myself it would only be once, the night I came home from that hospital. I did not sleep. I lay on top of my duvet with the ceiling light on, which I never do, and I stared at the water stain above the window that I had been meaning to fix for 2 years. The house was cold. I had been keeping the thermostat low since September because energy costs in New Brunswick had climbed again, and I was watching my spending more carefully than I had in years. I thought about that. I thought about the thermos of soup growing cold in my bag. I thought about the perfume. Something shifted in me that night. Not a dramatic thing, more like a floorboard settling, quiet but final. The next morning was a Saturday, which meant I had no reason to be anywhere. I made coffee and carried the old accordion folder from the shelf above the washing machine to the kitchen table. I had labeled it Family Support in pencil a long time ago. The letters slightly faded now. I sat down and began going through it the way you read a letter you have been avoiding, carefully, 1 page at a time. The mortgage contributions, the car loan co-signature, the catering invoices I had quietly settled when Nicole mentioned cash flow problems, the grocery orders I had covered during the pandemic when they told me things were tight, Daniel's dental bill from the year he had no coverage between jobs, Nicole's professional kitchen equipment. the stand mixer, the commercial-grade pans, the refrigeration unit for her van, their children's hockey registration, 2 kids, 2 seasons each. The family trip to Portugal 2 summers ago that they said was a gift from a client, but that I later learned had been partially funded through an e-transfer I had sent for what I thought were home repairs. I counted everything twice. 87 separate payments. Some small, some not. The total across 6 years was just under $214,000. I set the pencil down on the table and did not move for several minutes. I am not a dramatic person. I did not cry. I did not throw anything. I sat very still with my coffee going cold and looked at the number I had written at the bottom of the last page. And I thought about the water stain above my window, and the thermostat set to 18 degrees, and the pair of winter boots I had been meaning to replace for 3 seasons because the zipper on the left one had started to catch. Then I closed the folder. I called my financial advisor at TD the following Monday morning. Her name is Patricia, and she has been managing my RRSP and what remained of the savings I inherited from my own mother for 11 years. When I told her I needed to come in that week, she said Tuesday at 2. When I arrived and placed the accordion folder on her desk, she looked at it for a moment before looking at me. I need to close some things. I told her, all of the automatic transfers to Daniel and Nicole's accounts, the standing order on the grocery delivery, the loan co-signature. I want to understand what it takes to remove myself from that, and I need to review everything else in case there are authorizations I have forgotten about. Patricia is a quiet woman. She does not startle easily, but she went through my file with a careful eye that told me she was taking this seriously. At one point she paused and turned her monitor slightly toward me. "Margaret," she said, using my full name, the way she does when something matters. "There is something here you should see. In September, someone submitted a request to add a secondary account holder to your investment portfolio. The request was flagged because the supporting documentation did not match your signature on file. The name on the application was Nicole Renaud-Bouchard. I heard the words. I sat with them. She was not asking to be informed. I said slowly, "She was asking to be added." Patricia nodded. The request was denied and flagged, but it was submitted through a third-party financial services firm in Moncton. Someone had gone to the effort of preparing paperwork. I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the November air outside. This was not carelessness. This was not entitlement growing sloppy. This was deliberate. This was Nicole sitting somewhere with documents and a pen, calculating what she could reach before I noticed. "I want every account locked down," I said. "Fraud alerts on everything. Remove Daniel's emergency access to the checking account. Change all of my security information. And I want a letter on file stating that no changes can be made to any account without my in-person authorization and government-issued ID." Patricia met my eyes. "We will take care of it today." When I walked out of TD that afternoon, the wind off the St. John River was sharp enough to make my eyes water. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and breathed it in. The sky was low and gray, the way it gets in Fredericton in November. The kind of sky that feels like a held breath. I did not feel relief yet. I felt the particular steadiness that comes when you have made a decision that cannot be undone, and you know it is right, and you know the cost of it. I drove home and made soup. Real soup. Not from a can. I stood at the stove for an hour cutting carrots and leeks and listening to the CBC. And somewhere in the middle of it, I noticed that my hands had stopped feeling like they belonged to someone apologizing. The messages started 2 days later. The first was from Nicole, breezy and just slightly irritated in the way she had when she wanted something without asking directly. "Hey, Margaret. Just checking in, the grocery order didn't go through this week. Probably just a card issue. Can you sort it out? Let me know." I read it once. I set my phone face down on the counter and went back to my book. An hour later came another. This time, a longer message about the hockey registration reminder that had come in and how they were waiting on me to confirm the e-transfer. I did not respond. By evening, Daniel called. I let it go to voicemail. He sounded confused at first, then mildly annoyed, then something closer to worried. "Mom, Nicole says the automatic payment for the car insurance didn't come through either. Can you call me back? I'm sure it's just a banking glitch." A banking glitch. I sat with that for a moment. Then I turned the ringer off and went to bed at 9:30, which is something I had not allowed myself to do in years, because there was always something to manage. Always a notification to check. Always someone's small crisis humming at the edge of my attention. I slept until 7 the next morning. I cannot tell you the last time that had happened. The tone shifted over the following 48 hours in a way I had expected, but still found clarifying to witness. The confusion became urgency. The urgency became accusation. Daniel left 3 more voicemails. Nicole sent a long text that began with, "I'm not sure what's going on with you, but this is really affecting our family," and ended with a suggestion that I might be experiencing some kind of cognitive difficulty and perhaps should speak to someone. I read that one twice, slowly, and felt something harden in me that I think had needed to harden for a long time. My neighbor Brenda knocked on my door Thursday afternoon to let me know she had seen Daniel's car parked across the street for almost an hour the previous evening. "He didn't knock," she said carefully, watching my face. "He just sat there." I thanked her. After she left, I checked my door locks and made a note to call a locksmith. He did come. Eventually, on a Friday afternoon when the light was already going golden low the way it does in November, making everything look briefly warmer than it is. He knocked. I opened the door. He looked like a man who had not slept, which I suppose was fair. He was wearing the fleece I had given him 2 birthdays ago, and his hair needed cutting. He stood on my porch with his hands in his pockets, and for just a moment he looked exactly like the 12-year-old who used to wait for me on this same step when he forgot his house key. "Mom," he said, "can we talk?" I let him in. I put the kettle on because it gave me something to do with my hands. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had spread all those documents. And he looked around the kitchen the way you look at a room when you are seeing it instead of just moving through it. "Is the furnace still making that noise?" he asked. The clicking, "It has been making that noise for 2 winters." I said, "I kept meaning to call someone, but other things came up." He was quiet for a moment. He understood what I meant. I placed 2 mugs on the table and sat across from him. I did not make it easy by speaking first. That was something I had done too often, filling silence, so no one would have to sit uncomfortably in it. He started with the practical things. The mortgage payment had bounced. They had received a notice from the insurance company. Nicole was managing, but it was tight, very tight. and the kids were asking questions. I let him finish. Then I got up and brought the accordion folder from the counter and placed it between us on the table. I have been supporting your household for 6 years. Daniel. I opened the folder and turned it so he could read it. 87 payments. $214,000. Your mortgage top-up. Your car loan. Nicole's equipment. The trips. The hockey. The groceries. All of it has been coming from my pension and my savings while I kept the thermostat at 18 and wore the same winter boots until the zipper broke. He stared at the pages. His face moved through several things. Denial first. Then the particular blank expression that means something is landing in a place that resists landing. Mom, I didn't realize the full. You didn't ask? I said. That was the problem. You didn't ask because you didn't have to. It was just there, like a utility. That word landed. I saw it. And Nicole, I continued, keeping my voice even, tried to access my investment account in September. The bank flagged it. She had prepared paperwork with a third-party firm. His head came up. That is not entitlement, getting comfortable. Danielle, that is something else entirely. I have copies of everything the bank flagged. If that attempt is repeated, or if I receive any suggestion of legal pressure, I will not be the one who needs to worry about consequences. His mouth opened, closed. She said she was just looking into options. He said finally. But even as he said it, I could see him measuring it against what he knew of her. Against every small thing he had maybe chosen not to examine. I want you to hear me clearly. I said, I am not disappearing. I am not punishing you. I am stepping off a treadmill I should never have gotten on. I love you. I would do anything for you that a mother should do. But I cannot be your infrastructure. I am 64 years old. And I have been living like someone who is already invisible. And I am done with that. He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower and rougher than before. The house in Dieppe, he said. Without that support, we might have to look at our options. Yes, I said. You might? He nodded. Slowly. The way someone nods when they are not agreeing but are finally accepting. He left without asking for anything. That was new. 3 weeks passed. I changed the locks. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The way you do a thing that needs doing. I replaced my winter boots at a shoe store on Queen Street and did not look at the price before I decided. I bought a good wool blanket for the reading chair in my bedroom. The kind I had been looking at online for 2 years, and always closed the tab on before checking out. I turned the thermostat up to 21 degrees and stopped apologizing to myself for it. My granddaughter Emma called on a Sunday evening. She is 19, in her first year at UNB. Studying environmental science with the particular conviction of someone who still believes her choices can repair the world. She has her father's eyes and her great-grandmother's stubbornness, which I mean entirely as a compliment. Gran, she said. I heard some of what happened. Are you okay? I told her I was more okay than I had been in some time. There was a pause. Then I want you to know I'm not calling for anything. I just wanted to check on you. She hesitated. Things at home are pretty tense. She's not taking it well. I waited. I found something, Emma said carefully. I wasn't snooping. It was just on the printer. Documents. Gran. With your name on them. Mortgage refinancing applications. The numbers were really big. The property listed was yours. I closed my eyes briefly. She was planning to refinance your house, Emma said. The one in Fredericton. And list you as the primary borrower. The cold that moved through me then was different from the cold in Patricia's office. That had been shock. This was confirmation. My house. The birch tree out front. The kitchen table. The chair where I read. This house, which I had owned outright for 11 years, which was the only certain thing I had left of the life I had built, had been part of a calculation I was never meant to discover. Emma, I said carefully, can you take photos of those documents and send them to me? She did. Within the hour. The next morning I called Patricia, and then I called a lawyer named Susan Tremblay, whose office is on Carlton Street, and who came recommended by a woman in my book club whose own inheritance had once been contested. I brought the photos Emma had sent. I brought my bank documents. I brought the accordion folder. Susan went through everything methodically and without drama, which is exactly what I needed. She explained what Nicole had been building toward. She used phrases like fraudulent misrepresentation and unauthorized use of personal information. She told me that the documentation alone was sufficient to pursue formal action through the proper channels, and that even the attempt, independent of outcome, constituted a serious breach. Do you want to proceed formally? She asked. Or do you want to use this as protection? I thought about Daniel at my kitchen table, the way he had looked at those pages, the way he had left without asking for anything. Protection. For now, I said, but I want it all documented. Everything. Susan nodded. And I'll be frank with you. Margaret, if Nicole continue, the next step becomes more serious, and the options narrow considerably for her. I thanked her, and drove home, and made myself scrambled eggs and toast, and ate them at the kitchen table with the radio on, and the thermostat at 21 degrees. Nicole did not come to me directly. I had not expected her to. What I heard came through small channels over the following weeks. The kind of information that travels in the particular way it does in a mid-sized city where everyone knows someone who knows someone. Her catering business had lost 2 contracts. The SUV was returned to the dealer. A neighbor of theirs mentioned to a mutual acquaintance that there had been a for sale sign in front of the Dieppe house for several days before it was taken down again, suggesting a plan reconsidered or delayed. A woman in my watercolor class whose daughter knows Nicole's assistant said Nicole had mentioned looking at opportunities in Ontario. I absorbed this information the way you absorb weather. Observing, not celebrating, but not grieving either. Daniel came for the second time on a Tuesday evening in early December, this time with the children, my grandson, Theo, and Emma, who had driven him from campus for the evening. He had called ahead this time. He brought a bottle of Ontario Pinot Noir and a grocery bag with things to make pasta. He stood in my kitchen and boiled water and chopped garlic and looked, I thought, like a man trying very hard to remember who he was before he forgot. We ate at the kitchen table, the 4 of us, and Theo told me about his hockey team with the kind of detailed enthusiasm that only 10-year-olds maintain. And Emma caught my eye once across the table with a look that said many things without saying any of them. Daniel poured my wine and asked about my book club and listened to the answer. He did not ask me for anything. Before they left, he stood on the porch in his coat, while the kids waited in the car. The birch tree caught the light from the street lamp above it. The bare branches silver and still. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "I imagine you have." I said, "I'm going to figure it out. The house, the finances, all of it. I'm going to figure it out ourselves." He stopped. "I should have been doing that all along." "Yes," I said quietly. "You should have?" He nodded. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. There was a particular expression on his face that I had not seen in many years, one that I recognized from when he was younger and had made a mistake. He genuinely understood the weight of. He hugged me before he left. Not the brief, habitual hug of a man moving through an obligation. A real one. The kind that takes a moment. I stood on the porch after his car pulled away and watched the birch tree for a while. The temperature had dropped through the day, and everything was still in the particular way of a New Brunswick night when the cold finally settles in to stay. My breath made clouds and disappeared. Inside, the house was warm. I had left the lamp on in the reading room, and the kettle had just finished, and on the counter sat the cranberry loaf I had baked that afternoon. The same one I used to make every December for every family gathering. The one whose smell meant something reliable and good was nearby. I cut myself a slice. I made tea. I sat in the reading chair with the wool blanket pulled across my lap, and the lamp casting its small circle of gold over the page of my book. And I felt something that took me a moment to name. Because it had been absent for so long, I had forgotten what it felt like in my own home. Ease. Simple. Unearned. Requiring nothing of anyone. Ease. I had spent years making myself smaller so that others could feel larger. I had turned down the heat and worn broken boots and driven 4 hours on an empty stomach to sit in a hospital hallway while someone walked past me in perfume I had given her. I had told myself that this was what love looked like. The version without edges, without limits, without the word no, but love without limits is not love. It is erosion. And the woman left after the erosion is not a mother. She is a resource. She is a line item in someone else's budget, to be managed and eventually, when convenient, expanded. I was done being managed. My name is Margaret Elaine Doran. I am 64 years old. I was born in Moncton, and I raised 2 children in Fredericton, and I spent 31 years helping people find the stories they needed, which I think was the best work I ever did. I live alone in my house with the birch tree out front, and the furnace no longer makes that clicking sound because I finally called someone in November and it turned out to be a simple fix. 40 minutes and a part that cost less than I expected. I turned the thermostat up. I bought new boots. I let myself sleep until 7. And on a cold Tuesday evening in December, I sat in my reading chair with tea and cranberry loaf and understood something I should have understood a long time ago. You can love someone completely and still refuse to disappear for them. You can hold the door open without letting them take the house. You can be someone's mother without being their foundation, their safety net, their quiet, uncomplaining solution to every problem they chose not to solve. I ate the last of the loaf. I finished the tea. I turned the page. Outside, the birch tree stood tall in the cold and the dark, the way it had for 30 years. the way it would long after any of this was memory. Some things hold, not because they were never tested, but because they found out what they were made of and decided that was enough. I had finally found that out. It was, as it turned out, more than enough.